Okay, so now we understood how we host our website. See how the web hosting works. So here is the user where the user is trying to access the application. That means it could be your mobile or desktop or tablet, and through your internet you are going to access the web server. That is what the GoDaddy website, where you take some space, then you will be having your files, the website files. If for this instance, like if you see, so all the project related files, that means this home, about, and services, whatever the development we have done, all these pages will be stored into this particular web server space. So then automatically what will happen, whenever the client, the user sends a request to this server, then obviously according to our request, the response will come back, and that will be shown on the presentation layer. Okay, so I hope this is clear to everyone. So quickly we will see the diagram of client server architecture. So this is what we've been talking. So there are clients where you can access any of these devices. So client resides in any of these. Using the presentation layer, he will send a request to the server, and then server gives you the response back to your presentation layer. Now, you also need to understand the web environment. Basically, your presentation layer and business logic layer and database layer. So these are the primary things which everybody needs to understand before you go for your API testing. For example, presentation layer, we also call it as front end of the application. That means where user can see this front end development. So generally, what tools, what are all the skills the person should have? They might be developing the website pages using HTML, CSS, and then JavaScript. And there are certain framework, Angular, React. So these things they may use. These are all frameworks to develop your front-end application. So front-end application can also be called UI, stands for user interface. That means whatever you see here, where the user is able to see the application, see, this is called front end of the application, presentation layer. So this is built on HTML and CSS. So this kind of development work, whoever does, those people will be called as front end developers, or we also may call these people as web technologies or web technologies or front-end developers or UI developers. UI stands for user interface. Whatever the technology you are making use of it, you can call that. So this is the front-end part of the application. Now, the business logic layer. Here, our API comes into picture. So API stands for application programming interface, meaning this acts as an interface between two applications. So API is the interface between your front-end layer and this one you will call it as database layer, and you may call back-end development. Okay, so we will have front-end and we will also have back-end development. And in the backend development, you are going to use the languages like Java, Python, C, C++, all the languages people will use, and they are going to develop the backend part of the application. So this part we call it as backend development, and we call these people as backend developers. And also you will have database activities. When I say database layer, this is the database part. database developers. So you may use MySQL and you may use Arkel or DB2, MongoDB. There are so many. According to the requirement, people will be able to do that. So front end, and then what I'll do, I'll just consider this diagram. One more diagram I'll consider to make it simple. Okay, let me make one simple diagram, which is presentation layer. This is your presentation layer, and then you will have your database layer, and then your middle layer. Okay, so middle layer is your business logic layer. Business logic layer. So what will happen in this business logic layer? Only your API will reside. That means the business logic layer part is our API. So what will happen whenever the user sends any request from the presentation layer, then this will go to the API. Through the API, the request will go to the database layer, and then the response will come back to the presentation layer. So this is how your API will act as a interface between your presentation layer and the database layer. So what happens if you look at earlier, people used to do the application testing. So for example, if I have to test this registration functionality of faculty, what I have to do is I'll be going to this application form, and I am going to enter first name, last name, email, and fill all the details, and then I'm going to send a message. Then obviously send a message is the functionality where so the information should be sent to that particular website people. So that is what the functionality. So here, if you are checking whether the fields are correctly aligned, whether the layout is good, whether all the required fields are there in the application, if you are performing this kind of testing, that testing we call it as web testing. Web testing. So we just call it as UI testing. So UI testing is just to ensure that your application is showing properly and all the required fields are available. And once you submit this information, if at all you are submitting the data to a database, for example, you are registering a new user. So if the data is to be stored into your database, then you will go back to the database and verify that whether that is from the presentation layer through the business logic, whether the data is stored into the database or not. If you are checking, so that is what you are going to do as part of your web application testing, complete end-to-end testing. Then now what is happening because of this APIs, because of these APIs, we are not going to do a complete testing on our UI part. So if you test the logic separately uh, with the APIs, then obviously you will have to spend very less time for your UI testing. So how it is going to happen? What is that we are going to do as part of API testing? We are going to learn that. So now what we are going to do is first you need to have a clear idea on what is an API. So let's take an example of the redbus.in site, and if you look at what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the city Hyderabad, and you give some other city Bangalore or whatever you like, you can give, and then click on select a date, and then you will click on search buses. So when I click on this search buses functionality, it is pulling the details from different travels information. That means these people have a separate, this data is coming from these people's database, and this is coming from these people database, and every travels has their own price and their own timing for the particular buses. That means it is a separate API which this redbus.in is using. What does it mean? Whenever you pass these two parameters, Hyderabad and Bangalore, and select the date and click on search button, you are making use of these people's Vikram Travels, TVK Travels, and then KSM Roadway Travels, TVK Travels APIs are used to pull that information, and it is shown in your application. That means this redbus.in application functionality is integrated with these APIs, and that API will connect to these people's database, and from there the data is coming out. So that is how the APIs are working. So to make it very simple, for example, if you take your mobile, okay, so when you are taking your mobile, so you will have a provision of using your WhatsApp, right? So WhatsApp is your presentation layer. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to send my location to my friend. How do we do? We will share the location using what we will use? We will use Google Maps. So here Google Maps is our API. So Google Maps is not developed by your WhatsApp application, but we are integrating, we are making use of this Google Maps, and with that you will be able to access it. So when somebody, some other application is able to access an API which is already available in the internet, those are called public APIs. So that's where you will be able to make use of them easily. And also, if you take another example, you will be booking your cabs, right? So you will be booking, you will be making use of Rapido and Uber, Ola. All these also will make use of your Google Maps API. So all the Google Maps APIs are developed by Google, but these companies or these apps are making use of this API. So that means you are just making use of these APIs. And also if you look at your Google Pay or Phone Pay, take another example. So you are going to have your Google Pay and Phone Pay. So when you are booking, book my show, right? Book my show, when you're trying to do booking, at the end of ticket booking you will be navigated to either you wanted to make the payment from the UPI mechanism or from the credit card, from the credit debit card, whatever the mechanism you wanted to pay. So those are also can be called as your APIs. So that's how your application will be making use of the APIs. So the APIs which are available public, so those APIs can be directly accessed, and you will be able to access that application, and then the based on the request, the response will come back through your API. That's how you will be able to test the APIs. Now what we are going to do is, you are not going to test the web application. Instead, you are going to check only the API. How you are going to check? What is the tool you are going to use? So we are going to use a tool called Postman. Postman is the tool which is used for testing our APIs. So how to do and what kind of APIs we have, what are all the basic terminologies in API testing, those things also we will understand in the next session.